Hi friends, it's Laura, and today we are going to wrap up my reading for the year of 2021. I read so many great books this year, and I was a little surprised to see some of these stats. So we're gonna go through all my stats for the year and just talk about how my reading went in 2021. So once again, I managed to read a ton of books this year, 2 more from last year. So this is the most I've read in any given year. I read a total of 177 books, which amounted to 69,169 pages. That's a lot of pages. I always love seeing that page number, that page count. Makes me feel so accomplished, like even more than the book number itself. So up on the screen, I'm gonna have my chart of books read per month. These numbers actually include my DNFs. So I did start counting my DNFs, not towards my reading goal or anything like that, but just putting them in so that I could see how many DNFs I had throughout the year. So my total number of books read with DNFs is 182, but total number of books finished was 177. So you can see, like it says in January, I read 16 books. I actually read 14 because I DNF'd 2 in January, and then I DNF'd 2 books in May, so that number 18 is actually 16. And then I DNF'd 1 in August, so the 16 is actually 15. And then I did have like a bunch more DNFs, especially in the fourth quarter of the year, especially in December. I DNF'd a good number of books, but I just stopped including them because I just didn't care anymore, and I didn't want to have to fill in the information for books that I didn't even finish. So, and obviously you can see that as far as the books where I read the most, June was my best month for quantity because I did read 30 books in 30 days. The next highest was October, which is always the case. October, I read the most books. And if it wasn't for that 30 books in 30 days challenge, October would have been my best month quantity wise because I love the spooky season. I save like all my horror and thriller and mystery books for the month of October and read a ton. That is that. And then my lowest month quantity wise was November because I had a lot going on in that month and just didn't get around to half the things I wanted to. And now we'll have a look of the pages read per month, which perfectly matches the number of books read per month. The highest month, of course, was June with 9,000 pages in 1 month, which is awesome. And it put my average at around 5,600. So the next stat was really my most surprising stat. I was shocked when I saw this, and that is the format of books that I read in. So I'm gonna put up the chart here. You can see that the majority of the books that I read in 2021 were via audiobook. I had no idea that I relied on audiobooks so much for my reading, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that. I just thought it was so interesting. It was such a complete shock to me because I thought that I was pretty even with my physical reads and my audiobook reads, but that was not the case. So 54.4% of the books I read were via audiobook, 34.1% physical, 11% was a combination of the two. So either I started the book out physically and finished it audibly, or vice versa, or I did both at the same time, reading physically and listening to the audiobook. And then I think I had 1 ebook that I read in 2021. I don't usually read ebooks. I don't enjoy the experience. So next we're gonna move into my genres read, which should come as no surprise. It was no surprise for me, no surprise for you guys, that the majority of the books that I read were fantasy. I read 56% of my reading was fantasy, which makes sense. It's my most loved genre. And then of course the second highest was science fiction at 13.2%. I think that this is the most science fiction that I've read in any given year, so I'm very excited about that because I do enjoy it and I always tend to forget about it or not read as much as I want to. And this year I definitely did read as much as I wanted to. The 2 next highest read genres were both ties. I read a total of 14 books in each category, being contemporary and horror. Probably the most contemporary. Like, I don't usually read that much contemporary, but somehow I did this year, so that's interesting. And then after that we have thrillers. So I read 8 thrillers this year, 5 mysteries. I read 7 romances. Is that more than usual? I feel like it could be, or maybe it wasn't. I feel like 2020 I ended up reading more romances than I did this year. So I read across 11 different genres, which is great. And then my star ratings are always fun to look at, with my highest star rating that I gave out in 2021 being a 4-star rating, which is actually really good. 38.4% of the books that I read were 4 stars, which made my average rating around 4 stars, 4.1, something like that. So I always tend to have a very high rating, very high average rating. I'm wondering if that's going to change this year, because I noticed this past year that I tend to rate things more highly than I necessarily should, and exaggerate, I guess is the word, the positive things in a book as opposed to the negative. And looking back on my reading overall, a lot of the books that I gave 3 stars could have been, not a lot, but a good number of them could have been 2 stars. And a good number of the books that I gave 4 stars in the moment, now looking back on it, were not as memorable as I thought they were going to be and could have been 3 stars. So this year, something that I'm keeping in mind when I'm rating books is to rate more accurately. And if that means rating lower, then that's something that I'm gonna do. I always feel really bad like giving books 2 stars or even 1 stars, but like there's definitely some books that deserve it when it comes to my personal taste. I'm going to definitely try to be more accurate in my ratings this year, which means that I might have a lower average rating for 2022, but I'm okay with that. 37.2% of the books I read were 5 stars, and that is a lot, guys. That is a lot of 5 stars, and that's another thing that I'm questioning. I had 20.3% of the reads were 3 stars, 4% of what I read was 2 stars. Only 7 books that had 2 stars. Moving into age category, this was really not much of a surprise, but 53.8% of the books I read were categorized as adult, and 44% were categorized as young adult. And I feel like as each year goes by and I get older and older, I feel like this is going to continue to skew towards adult reads taking the higher percentage. Just a natural thing. Like, I still love YA and I will continue to read YA always, but I think it's just natural for that adult number to go up and up and up. And then 2.2% of my reading was middle grade. I only read 4 middle grade books in 2021, which is definitely something I want to improve on in 2022, because I discovered so many great middle grades in the past 2 years, and I definitely want to read more middle grade this year and in the years to come. This is something that I tracked for the first time in 2021, but it is publication year, so I'll pop up the chart. The majority of the books that I read came out in 2021. And I'm so shocked. I'm so shocked by that number, because I feel like I am always playing catch up when it comes to new releases. I'm always missing out on new releases from that particular year and reading a ton of backlisted books, which I don't really know which I prefer. I don't know if I prefer to keep up with new releases or to keep focusing on backlisted books. But seeing this result, I kind of like that. I like the fact that I was reading a ton more new releases in 2021. So I would like that to be a thing that continues. But I was so surprised that that was the result for this year. And then 24.7% of my reading was books that were published in 2020. So I was reading a ton. That was the majority of my reading, were front listed titles. And then we just have a variety of other publication years. 2019 again was the 3rd highest. So that's definitely a trend. Then we move into where I got my books from. 82.4% of the books I read were books that I owned, which is a great number. But what I didn't track was how many of those were books that I bought previous to 2021 versus books that I bought in 2021. I really want to try to see if I can figure out that number, because that would be definitely more interesting. But I did read a majority of the books that I physically owned on my physical TBR shelves, which I'm very happy about. 15.9% of the books that I read were borrowed, so I got them from the library, and 1.6% were books that were gifted. So those are books that were either sent to me for review or books that I got like a free download, like Tor does their free ebook download every month, so I might have gotten books that way. So that was interesting, but I'm very happy with that number. Moving into the next stat, the majority of the books that I read in 2021 had some form of LGBTQ plus rep, which is very, very good. You can see where it was either the main character or just present in the story from other side characters, but it's definitely more than was not. So very happy with that number as well. I think that this was the year that I reread more books in a year than I ever have before. I reread 12 books. I can't even tell you what some of those are, but I think that most of my rereading this year was because of the next book in a series coming out and me rereading to like remember what happened previously. I'm pretty sure that that was most of what my rereads were. I did reread the Broken Earth trilogy this year, so that was 3 of them right there. And then we have my series versus standalone. Obviously, the majority of the books that I read were part of a series. That doesn't necessarily mean that I was catching up or keeping up to date on series. That just means that I was probably starting new series for the first time, which is a lot of what I did in 2021, to be honest. I read the first books in tons of new series, which is why I have so many series that I'm in the middle of now. And so yeah, 53.3% of the books I read were books in series. 46.7% were books that were standalones. It's so ridiculously hard to find books that are standalones, especially when it comes to fantasy, so most of those were probably not fantasy. And a lot of that also includes my rereads, so a lot of that was in there too for the series. But it looks like I was doing a good job keeping up with the series, but I wasn't. I did finish a total of 9 series this year, however, so that is an improvement from last year. I finished 7 series last year. This year I finished 2 more, which is great, but I did start a whole heck of a lot more than that. So, and I will have a video coming out later on in the month on series that I did complete in 2021. Okay, moving into the author stats, and I think these are the last stats that we have to go over. We have POC authors, and this is the stat that I was very disappointed with this year, and that is the fact that I read 37.4% of the books that I read were by BIPOC authors and 62.6% were not. So we've already discussed my goals for 2022. I'm aiming for 50% BIPOC authors. There's my stat for that. Will definitely be improving in 2021 or 2022. Author gender. The majority of my reading continues to be women authors. 69.8% of the books that I read were written by women, 25.8% written by men. I just tend to pick up more books by women. It's a thing that I don't really pay attention to as far as gender, but it just happens that way that I read more women than anything else. But the books written by men was definitely higher than it has been in the past. And then 3.3% of the books that I read were by non-binary authors, which is definitely an improvement from last year. And then as far as where the authors are from, the majority of them are from the United States or the UK. That's another thing that I would like to improve on in 2022. 3 of the authors that I read from this year were from Canada. But that's it. Those are my stats for 2021. All in all, it was a great reading year. I am very happy with most of my stats and results, except for a couple that I definitely will be working on in 2022. I always think it's fun to go back and look at the statistics of the previous year as far as reading. Plus, I just like stats. So this is a fun video for me to film. I know not everyone likes watching stats, but I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments how overall your 2021 reading went and maybe some of the things that you would like to improve on. Like, do you track certain things in your reading or do you not at all? Let me know in the comments. But that is going to be it for this video. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.